Welcome back. As we wait for the president, we're going to turn to his other appearance today. As we mentioned earlier this hour, President Trump and the Attorney General Bill Barr announced this afternoon that they are sending federal law enforcement resources into some Democrat-led cities in order to, what they say, crack down on violent crime. Now, while some cities are actually calling for federal agents to leave their cities, the situation in some parts of the country is a bit more complicated. Kansas City, Missouri, one of 3 cities included in the announcement alongside Albuquerque and Chicago, actually already has federal agents in their city because their police department asked for their help after a 5-year-old was killed in late June. This announcement expands that original operation, which was first announced on July 8th and which the president described as a success in his speech today. So joining me now is Kansas City Mayor Quinton Lucas. So, Mr. Mayor, I think this is a case where a lot of things are getting conflated. And so what I'm hoping to do is we can sort of unpack this. Explain what the city of Kansas City asked the federal government help for.
I believe Kansas City, and it's good to be with you. Kansas City asked for help relating to how to solve and clear unsolved murders. We did have the murder of a 4-year-old. We've had an increase in Kansas City this year. And what we've heard is this would be pinpointed investigative support. It isn't us saying that we have given up or failed dramatically on solving all crimes or policing. It has nothing to do with protests. It had everything to do with, for specific criminal incidents, getting more background support to help solve those, help find murder suspects.
Do you support what is being this operation in general, or are you concerned it's getting conflated with what's happening in Portland and the president's rhetoric about Chicago?
Well, when I was growing up, we talked a lot about, or you all talked a lot about dog whistling. I think right now we have dog barking. The president starts off his remarks today with a long commentary about Democratic-led cities, about failures. I believe at one point talking about the fact that liberal politicians are, quote, killing people. That's uncalled for. That is completely unrelated to, I think, what should be a narrow law enforcement effort. I certainly support, and I've talked to a number of mayors this week, including Mayor Lightfoot in Chicago. I fully support taking efforts on that will allow us to solve crimes. What I don't support is trying to conflate protests in Portland to Black Lives Matter protests, to murders, to claiming that there's been this dramatic increase in shootings and murders only because of the protests following the murder of George Floyd. That's inaccurate. That's false. It is separating the country even more. And I think it is incredibly unfortunate. It isn't helping us actually as a political matter in Kansas City. So far, it actually sadly hasn't helped us in solving some of our murders, some of those more serious crimes. And I would hope that to the extent we get federal support and help, it's working with local leaders. It's not just bashing them.
Do you, you said you had learned about this operation on Twitter. Did somebody finally fill you in from the Department of Justice on what they were doing, or did you have to proactively find out?
Well, so about an hour after I learned about it from somebody tweeting at me that the White House press secretary name-checked my city, the United States attorney for my district called me, described what the program was, what it was supposed to look like. And I've appreciated at least having more information. But frankly, even today, the Attorney General announced that there were 200 arrests in Kansas City over the recent weeks by the FBI. Meanwhile, our local U.S. Attorney's Office had announced its first arrest just yesterday. So it's either 1 or 200. I mean, this isn't terribly, I guess, inconsistent sometimes with what we hear from this administration, but I think it is frustrating. And so I do hope, to the extent we're getting information, it's clear, it's broad, it's helpful, and it lets us know what's going on. But what I don't want it to be is the sort of thing where they're just saying Democratic-led cities or cities or hellholes or anything like I've heard the president say before, and we actually get down to the violent crime problem. I have one main concern, which is that the pain of my community being used as a political tactic. It's not. There are people suffering and people harmed, and I want us to care more about them than scoring election points against liberals.
Is this dividing you from the rank and file of police or your leader, the elected leaders and police unions here? I mean, there's been, you've seen where some police union activists have been very supportive of the sort of federalization of this versus those leaders in these cities. What has this done with your relationship to the rank and file police department?
You know, I don't think you can say we're closer. I think that, yeah, you are hearing a lot of folks kind of thinking that this is the best solution. And, you know, if you're used to, you know, hammering in a nail all the time, then you'll see every problem like a nail. And I think that is part of what we're having. I think it is causing division, which is unfortunate, because I think early on in the George Floyd protests, we saw even more law enforcement folks talking about what are new ways we can try to solve crimes? How do we actually look to be more creative? It wasn't all adversarial. And a lot of us mayors, and let me tell you something about mayors, right? Usually radicals aren't elected to mayoral positions. They may make it to Congress or other places, but we're folks who work with the police. In many cities, they run the police. And we know that they're an important part of solving crimes. So to hear the Attorney General, to hear the President basically say that your mayors aren't with you, they're not there for you, that for some reason we want to see the number of murders on our street. We want to see the murders of young black men in our country, something I care about, I'd argue, a hell of a lot more than maybe Bill Barr does, is frustrating, it is divisive, and it's wholly unnecessary. You know, I've been working with the U.S. Attorney's Office for years. I was on the city council before. I would love to be able to work with federal agencies, local folks, right, our clergy, black leaders, to make sure we're making our city safer. Unfortunately, the president's speech today only related to one narrow area, and one narrow area where I think he's still looking to divide.
I am curious, how would you assess the state of Kansas City right now as far as safety and crime is these days? How would you characterize it to your constituents?
We're nowhere close to where we need to be. You know, we have a problem with gun violence, a significant problem with gun violence. If you come here, you're probably likely to not be a victim of crime or anything of that sort, but gun violence has increased dramatically. It's increased in Chicago, St. Louis, so many cities in this part of the country. But the amazing thing is, we'll talk about the violence, but we won't talk about the guns. We won't talk about the illegal guns that are coming into our city. A big amount of the federal help that we've wanted over years, and what I continue to want, is how can we track those who are distributing illegal weapons to Kansas City? How can we track those that are part of some of our gang traffic relating to firearms? That's been our biggest issue. I mean, you know, in excess of 90% of our homicides are gun related. So there's not just this orgy of violence. It is the fact that people are resolving more disputes with guns because they can get them easily, and because we haven't had anyone step up and say, maybe we can do something about the weapons that have been used to kill thousands of black men in our country, thousands of people in our country throughout the years. And so, yeah, there's a gun violence problem. There's an increase in homicides. We all agree with that. That's why I would welcome federal support in that targeted.
I was just going to say,
area.
Would you characterize it as a form of organized crime, considering how guns move from city to city like this? Is that what you're dealing with here, is sort of a much larger and more sophisticated organization?
Yes. Yes. I mean, I think here's the deal, right? None of the guns come originally from the inner city of Kansas City. In the same way they don't come from the south side or the west side of Chicago, the same way they're not coming from North St. Louis, right? There is trafficking in a number of these firearms. And these aren't just 50-year-old firearms that are being stolen from grandpa's house. I mean, there is an organized effort by which firearms are getting into our cities. And for whatever reason, we have these speeches about, you know, protesters and Black Lives Matter causing murders, which is asinine, and don't actually look at the real issues relating to the ready access of firearms in our city and the fact that they're being used to fuel, I think, genocide on our streets. And so, yeah, I'd love to have a lot more conversation with that. And that is a place where the ATF, the FBI, the DEA are highly relevant and can be highly helpful.
And in some cases want to help, but in some cases their bosses on that score aren't always as interested in helping. Mayor Quinton Lucas, Mayor of Kansas City, really appreciate you coming on, telling us what is happening on the ground there in Kansas City, and a very important point about the issue of gun trafficking. Thank you, sir. Really. Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor, subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Beat the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, You don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press Mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.